A powerful tide is sweeping across the globe. Between 1950 and 2022, it pulled the world's median age from 22.2 to 30.24 years, caused fertility rates to decline from 4.86 to 2.31 children per woman, made the average population growth rates to contract from 1.73 to 0.84%, and the share of the aged population to increase from 5.12 to 9.8%. Consider Japan, one of the countries with the largest share of old people today. In the said period, its median age rose from 21.2 to 48.74, its fertility rate dwindled from 3.66 to 1.3, its population growth rate plummeted from 1.65 to negative 0.53, and a share of the aged population skyrocketed from 4.89 to 29.91. In 1950, only Luxembourg had a fertility rate of below replacement rate, that is, of below 2, which stood at 1.97. By 2022, 116 countries had their fertility rates below replacement rates, with Hong Kong Special Administrative Region and Republic of Korea tailing the list at 0.75 and 0.88 respectively. Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There is more, especially if we project these values into the future, following United Nations medium variant forecast. Welcome, I'm James, an economist and a data scientist from Amelia Insights. Before we go any further, let's have a high-level overview of the interface of this visualization and how it works, and then dive in to discuss the causes of the above phenomena, why we should care, and what can be done to avert future socioeconomic and demographic crises. This visualization contains many interconnected moving parts. Let's examine them briefly. The project is divided into 3 pages, labeled Population Pyramid, Line Chart, and Area Chart. I'll be coming back to the last 2 in a minute. The first page is made of 5 buttons, a slider, a fertility chart that is not yet populated, a population pyramid, the year, country, and 1950 population text, and a graph that shows the shares of various age groups by gender to the total population by year. The Start button is used to start the visualization. When you click the Start button, a different text appears below the 1950 population text. Another text is also displayed beneath the current year's population text, indicating the population increase relative to 1950. Also, note the labels in the population pyramid. The blue labels indicate that the shares of that age group to the total population for a given gender is greater than the share of the other gender for the same age group. The red labels show the opposite. For example, for South America, note that there are significantly older females compared to males for a given age group. There are 2 labels inside the population pyramid. The first one, which is static, shows the median age in 1950, and the second one shows the dynamic median age, that is, the median age in the current year. You will also notice a population pyramid with the black stroke rectangles. This is the population pyramid for the selected country in 1950. It is for comparison with the current year's population pyramid. Before I go to the Post Resume button, notice the 2-line graphs that appear on the fertility chart. The thin blue line shows the trends in world's fertility rate, while the thick orange line shows the selected country's fertility rate. The labels show the current year's fertility rates for the 2 entities. The Post Resume button is used to pause and resume the visualization, just as the name implies. The third button is the Select input. It contains all regions classified by geographical or income definition. The first item is the world, followed by 6 continents. There are 32 regions as classified by geographical definition. Then we have 13 regions as defined by income. The rest are countries, which are 221 in total. You can select any region or country at random, and its 1950s population pyramid will populate. If you want to visualize the evolution of the selected region or country's population pyramid and fertility chart, you can either click the Start or the Post Resume button. Note that you can start over the visualization if you click Start. The next element is the text input. We can use it to search for any country or region. For example, if I search Amer, and click outside, all regions and countries that contain the entered characters appear in the select input list. Note the background colors of the regions and countries are retained to easily distinguish them. If I type income, all regions that contain the word income will populate. The visualization is also designed to handle the errors gracefully. If I search for some characters that do not match any country or region, say QQQ, I get an error prompting me to search for a valid region or country. If I now search for South in capital letters, all entities that contain the word South will appear. This is because the text input is case insensitive. If I clear the text input and click outside, the world's population pyramid in 1950 will populate. Next, we have the slider input. If we do not want to use pause resume button to animate the population pyramid, we can use the slider input to navigate between the different years. For example, in 2100, let me just navigate to 2100 using the slider. South America's median age will be 49.08 years compared to 18.68 in 1950. If we click any point within the slider, the graphs will update to display the selected year's data. Also, note that I'm changing the background colors of the entire chart and the fertility chart when I go past 2021. The next graph that we'll consider is the evolution in the shares of different age groups to the total population. For example, if we place the cursor on the South American males aged 65 to 69, we can see that in 1950, the share of men in this age group was 0.66%. By 2020, the share had risen to 1.73% and is expected to rise to 3.11% by 2100. The background of this visualization is also changing depending on whether we are before or past 2021. Let me also illustrate something else here. I will select another country, say China. If I click Start and then hover over the bars, notice that the graphs for the different shares of population by gender and age groups do not appear. This was designed this way to improve the user's experience. Now, when I hover over the bars when the animation is paused, notice that the graphs appears now. I will select another country or region here, say Europe. Let us now go to page 2 and click Start. The first figure compares the evolution of total population of the selected country or region and is compared with the world's with the base year set as 1950. The second figure shows the annual population growth rates for the two entities. We can also use a slider to move through the different years. Similar to the first chart, I'm also changing the background color of the visualization when I go past 2021. Let us now move to page 3. The page presents two graphs, an area chart and a line chart. The figure on the left-hand side shows the shares of young, labor, and aged, where the young are defined as those below 15 years, labor force those between 15 and 64, and those above 64 years defined as old. We can see that the share of the old in 1950 was 7.94%, but it is expected to increase to 32.85% by 2100. Similar to the other pages, we can also use the start and pause buttons and slider input ledge to control the visualization. That is the high-level overview of how this visualization works and its interface. We will now switch to the next section, where we will explore the reasons behind the falling global population and fertility rates, consequences, and remedies. Let's begin with the reasons for the decline. Number 1, education. Education makes many people prioritize career growth, increases labor force participation rates, promotes family planning, awareness, and increases women's autonomy. Consequently, marriages and childbearing have been deterred. To substantiate this claim, Figure 1 shows the relationship between education and fertility rates by income group. The figure clearly shows that countries with higher education have lower fertility, although the relationship is not linear. Number 2, industrialization and urbanization. Urbanization and industrialization reduces the need for agrarian manual labor, increases cost of living in towns, especially due to high housing and food costs, and increases access to family planning services. Preferences for lower families due to high cost of living also leads to higher demand for family planning services. A plot of urbanization rate against fertility is presented in Figure 2. The figure shows a clear negative relationship between the two. Notice that there is large variation in lower income groups thanks to larger variations in urbanization rates and incomes. Number 3, high cost of living and wage stagnation. High financial burden with wage stagnation makes it hard for parents to afford basic necessities, and that childbearing and upbringing becomes expensive. Consider Figure 3, which shows the evolution of real median wages and inflation in USA, with 1983 set as base year, that is, normalized to 100. The figure shows that median wages have barely increased by 50%, while CPI, which is a measure of cost of living or inflation in short, rose by 171%. The same relationship also holds when we examine the growth of CPI and real average wages in OECD. While average wages increased by 32% between 1991 and 2021, CPI shot up by 169%. These two examples clearly indicate that while cost of living has increased enormously across the globe, median wages have not. This has consequently negatively affected birth rates as cost of living has shot up. By the way, in one of the 25 projects that I plan to undertake, all of which have global coverage, I will analyze the global wage stagnation and CPI, and I will explore the issue at a deeper detail. For now, let's just remember that the two are some of the major causes of low fertility and thus a drag in the population growth rates. The main drivers of high cost of living across many countries are increase in cost of education, health, and housing, the most basic needs. On the other hand, wage stagnation has been attributed to slowdown in global productivity, globalization and offshoring, decline in unionization, and rising income inequality. Another factor is healthcare advancements, which have reduced child mortality rates. This has in turn led to a decline in birth rates as parents no longer feel the need to have larger families for survival and support in old days. Notably, most women in developing countries argue that they get many children to maximize their survival. Number 5, climate change. Several studies have argued that climate change, which has mainly been attributed to by extensive pollution, has negatively affected male fertility rates, that is, sperm count. Pollution is blamed for increasing chemicals and heavy metals, which have decreased sperm count and quality. For instance, a study by Levin and others in 2023 in 53 countries found that between 1973 and 2018, global sperm count fell by 51.6%. While the annual sperm count decline between 1973 and 2000 was 1.2%, the rate accelerated to 2.6% between 2000 and 2018. The authors attribute these changes to environmental factors that have caused hormonal imbalances and an increase in toxin concentrations. Finally, a discussion of the decline in global fertility and population growth would be incomplete without the discussion of China's one-child policy. Let's just search for China here and observe its trends in fertility rate between 1950 and 2022. Remember that the country implemented a one-child policy in 1979, which was then lifted in 2016. As the figure shows, even before the enactment of the policy, the country's fertility rate was already declining thanks to rapid shift from rapid agrarian economies as a result of urbanization and industrialization, increased access to family planning services, education, and changing social norms. Thus, although the policy accelerated the decline in fertility rates in the country, the changes cannot be solely attributed to it. Nevertheless, the spillover effects of the policy are still visible today. However, let's not dwell much on this cause of fertility reduction as it was caused by the government. While there are positive outcomes of declining global population, such as decreased environmental damage, increased real wages, and reduction in the strain on limited resources, this discussion will not dwell on this. This is because in the long run, The merits of declining population are offset by its drawbacks. We will categorize the negative consequences of population slowdown into the demand and supply sides, starting with the demand side. Demand side. Slowing population growth can lead to increased healthcare expenditure. This is because the share of the aged increase, which consequently raises the demand for elderly care services, including healthcare costs. Governments may then be forced to borrow, which can lead to escalation of public debt. These assertions are in line with Figure 5, which reveals a positive relationship between the share of the aged and the current healthcare expenditure. Declining population is also associated with higher pension and social security. With higher pension and social security requirements, governments may be forced to raise the contributions from the working age population, increase taxes, lower payable pensions, or even borrow. Consider Figure 6, which shows the relationship between the share of the aged and pensions in 38 OECD countries. The figure reveals a positive relationship between the share of elderly and pensions, with Costa Rica, Mexico, and Chile having the smallest share of the elderly and also the share of their pensions to GDP. Japan, Italy, and Greece had the highest shares of these values. The reduction in population growth can lead to shrinking markets as a result of depressed demand for goods and services. This makes businesses cut production. Lower profitability by businesses can lead to decline in investment and employment, which can affect the overall economic growth and development. Moreover, aging population can lead to increase in savings and low investment, which can also lead to economic stagnation. Supply side. Turning to the supply side, declining population will lead to labor shortages as a result of shrinking labor force. This will lead to tighter labor market with a higher job vacancy ratio. This will drive up labor costs as businesses will find it harder to hire and retain workers. Secondly, rapidly declining population leads to less innovation and declining productivity. A slowdown in population growth implies that fewer younger people are entering into the labor force. This can negatively affect technological growth. Several studies have shown that young people are the drivers of innovation and new ideas. For example, an analysis of 3 million patents and 1.4 million inventors by Kattenberg, Jaif, and Lachman in 2023, and which covered the period 1976 to 2018, revealed that patenting peaks between 30 and 40 years and thereafter decreases. Since economic theory and empirical studies concur that innovation, that is, technology and new ideas, are the major drivers of economic growth and development in the long run, limited innovation will hinder the growth of productivity and drag economic advancements. Consider Figure 7, which shows the number of patents per 1,000 people in Japan, USA, and China. The graph shows that Japanese patenting increased rapidly and peaked in 2000s. Coincidentally, it was also the same decade that the country's population reached its maximum. The other challenge of slowing population growth is that it may lead to low income generation by the smaller working class and low tax revenues. This may lead to a rising cost of capital, which can slow down economic growth and development following depressed investments. Finally, a smaller labor force implies low savings, consumption, and investment rates. Since these variables are important components of aggregate demand in an economy, their drop will imply slower economic growth rates and development. Let's now focus on some of the remedies of the above challenges. First, lower the cost of living. There are two main issues that we need to note concerning the lowering of the cost of living. First, lowering the cost of living will make it more affordable for many families to raise children. Some of the policies that can lower the cost of living include lowering the high cost of childcare through subsidies, addressing the high income inequality through ensuring a fair income distribution, provision of affordable housing, education, and healthcare. Lowering the cost of living requires a lot of funding. Where will the government get it from? Some of the approaches to raise the extra revenue include tax reforms, encourage the use of private-public partnership in provision of essential basic needs like education, housing, and healthcare, improving government efficiency and lowering corruption, which will create a cordial relationship with the people, increase trust with the public, and raise individuals' willingness to pay tax, among other measures. In short, The relationship between the government and the public should be a form of a mutual gift exchange where each party feels obliged to appreciate the other for the excellent service rendered. Second, it is mostly the highly developed countries that tend to have the highest cost of living thanks to their high standards of living, advanced infrastructure, quality healthcare and education, huge maintenance costs, and higher labor costs. Governments in these countries face a hurdle between balancing a lower cost of living and high standards of living, that is, provision of quality goods and services. To this end, these countries should invest in innovation and technologies that lower production costs and consequently lower the cost of goods and services. The basic question for the government and policymakers that should be, how do we increase the wealth and standards of living of our people while minimizing the cost of living? The second approach is to encourage immigration. Immigrants bring skills, talents, and vibrancy into the labor market. Countries should open up by lowering the restrictive policies that hinder immigration, for example, Japan. However, it should be clearly noted that encouraging immigration is a short-run fix and not viable in the long run because of the following reasons. First, it does not address the root causes of declining native population and low birth rates. Second, with time, there may be large influx of immigrants which can constrain social cohesion and cause cultural conflicts. Third, immigrants may not invest heavily in the target country, but rather may do so in their source countries by increasing home remittances and FDI. Thus, the target country may not experience the desired growth and developments. Fourth, a large number of immigrants is politically unpopular as they are seen to strain local resources, for example, health and education, and take local jobs, among other perceived drawbacks. To this end, it would be important for the people to realize the bitter truth that the world does not belong to anyone, that we are all immigrants to our current locations and in our current countries. Therefore, we have a duty to allow other immigrants as well. What is needed now is to hasten the process of global integration and unification to make it possible for anyone willing to migrate and settle wherever they want to do so. This would benefit everyone, including the receiving and the sending countries. Indeed, on 15th July 2017, The Economist argued that if there were free movements in the world, it would be USD 78 trillion richer. A third alternative is to enhance a flexible and efficient education system. Governments should implement policies that ensure education, work, and life balance. It should make it possible for people to learn and complete the highest desired education level, for example, masters or PhDs, in time, say by between ages 25 and 30, so that they have ample time to work, marry, and get children. A flexible and friendly work, education, and life balance will reduce the pressures between a career and having a family. I am pessimistic about flexible work hours and friendly maternal and paternal leave because the employers are profit maximizers who may not buy into that idea. Increasing decent and productive self-employment opportunities, say through boosting entrepreneurship instead of being employed, may help, as people may have more freedom to make their own independent choices. That is, for example, when employed from 8 to 5 p.m. and living in a rental in town, it is harder to afford more babies compared to when self-employed and living in your own house. Anyway, that's on a light note, but I trust you can get the gist of what I'm driving at. Fourth, countries should promote technological advancement and innovations to boost productivity, thereby offsetting potential declines in labor force growth and productivity. This will help in freeing time to spend in family and meaningful work and leisure while increasing incomes at the same time. This can be achieved through provision of better business environment to encourage entrepreneurship, providing tax incentives, say for 10 years, for firms and businesses that invest in technology, and encouraging both private and public research and development, for example, in telemedicine and robots. This will increase overall productivity and incomes. In my opinion, There are two issues that we need to consider when focusing on this approach as a measure to solve for declining populations. First, research and development is concentrated in the rich countries as they have the resources to commit for long-term expensive investments. However, they are the ones whose populations are aging faster, for example, Japan. Therefore, they may need to encourage younger skilled innovators from developing countries, which again interlinks with the point on encouraging immigration. Second, technology and innovations are public goods. They can easily be copied and replicated, yet they are expensive in terms of time and resources used to innovate and discover. This may discourage individuals, firms, and companies and institutions from innovating. There is therefore a need for countries to commit to a global fund to support budding innovators. Moreover, there is a need for a global cooperation among countries, institutions, and firms to foster technological progress and protect intellectual rights for the benefit of everyone. The fifth area that the government needs to address are to the environmental factors that have been associated with declining fertility. To this end, several international meetings and agreements have been made to counter the climate change and pollution. These include the establishment of United Nations Framework Conventions on Climate Change in 1992, the Kyoto Protocol of 1997, the Sustainable Development Goals of 2015, the Paris Agreement of 2015, and the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference of the Parties, among others. However, most of these measures have been unsuccessful thanks to the vested political and economic interests, insufficient implementation and enforcement mechanisms, financial and technological constraints, and differing national interests and priorities, among others. To overcome these challenges, there is need to have a long-sighted vision that goes beyond political cycles, better collaborative efforts and international cooperation, strengthen accountability and enforcement mechanisms, further research in ways that will make it profitable to reduce emissions, for example, investment in renewable energies, ensure a more equitable distribution of income, especially to the low-income earners who demand more coal and charcoal, clear forests and engage in activities that contribute to climate change, and educate public about climate change and possible mitigation levels at household level, for example, planting trees. Finally, the government should engage with their populations through surveys to understand the challenges that people face which prevent them from having children and what they think can be done. Probably many governments have shunned this issue because it is highly personal, but it will provide useful insights on the way forward. In conclusion, the present environment is far from ideal for raising children, primarily due to substantial cost of living that cast uncertainties upon families. Therefore, it is imperative for governments to have a coordinated effort to tackle the high cost of living globally. Given the interconnected nature of our world through trade and climate change, it is also paramount for governments to engage in collaborative efforts to foster global peace and development, considering the significant spillover effects. Thank you for your valuable time. Looking ahead to see you in the next project, where we will delve further into the realm of global trade. Until then, goodbye for now.